Hello everyone, I'm back with another video. Today's video will be, what if Spider-Man was the first superhero movie instead of Superman in 1978? I wanted to make this video after I saw Superman, so let's begin this video, shall we? Okay, so the first of which would be Spider-Man, released in 1978. I would definitely not cast Christopher Reeve as Spider-Man. I feel like he's just not the right choice for Spider-Man. Instead, I could picture the actor who played Superman in his teenage years as Spider-Man. I think he fits perfectly. Now, the beginning scene would show Mr. and Mrs. Parker. And of course, them leaving Peter with Uncle Ben and Aunt May. I could see Ed Asner as Uncle Ben. Like in Spectacular Spider-Man, he was the voice of Uncle Ben in that show. And I have to say, Ed Asner was perfect casting for Uncle Ben in this show. We then skip ahead a few years later, which is during Peter's grad senior trip, which is when he would get bitten by the spider. Of course, it would have been mentioned that his parents are dead. As for MJ, she would also be in this film at this scene, as well as Gwen Stacy and Flash Thompson. And of course, Aunt May would appear too, and I can see Angela Lansbury as Aunt May. But she would only be in the first half, because she would be dead throughout the second half. But after the trip, Uncle Ben can give out the whole "with great power comes great responsibility" thing, and when Peter's out by himself, he sees a criminal, tries to stop him, but then this leads to Uncle Ben being killed. And Peter breaking the news out to Aunt May. We then cut to, graduation day, and so Spider-Man makes it his goal to find the man who killed his parents. And in the end, he does find the man who killed his parents. And it turns out he is a criminal working for the crime lord of New York, the Kingpin, who I could actually see being played by Ned Beatty. He would have been perfect as Kingpin. But the main villain would be Green Goblin, who I could definitely see being played Gene Hackman. Now, in the first half, he would be Norman Osborn, but then in the second half, he would become the Green Goblin. Throughout most of the movie, Spider-Man's trying to find the Kingpin while starting a relationship with Gwen Stacy, because MJ didn't become big until the 80s, so yeah. Midway through the film, Spider-Man defeats Kingpin, but Gwen is captured by the Green Goblin, and, Green Goblin throws Gwen off. Harry could even be watching this. And I think the actor who played Harry in Christopher Reeve Superman films would actually be a good Harry. Now, does Gwen die? No. In the end, she would be saved, actually. Spider-Man defeats the Green Goblin, but he would not die. Unlike the first Raimi movie. Instead, he would be arrested. And the last we would see of him would be in the police car. And then he swings off, and then looks at the camera, and winks. He doesn't smile, he just winks. Now, J. Jonah Jameson would also appear, and I could definitely see Stan Lee playing him, because he wanted to play J. Jonah Jameson for a long time. The movie would be a huge success, and in 1980, or 1981, depending on where you live, Spider-Man 2 would be released. The film would take more of a darker approach. It would have more of a darker tone compared to the previous movie. As for the villains, they would be Kraven the Hunter, who I could probably see being played by Sylvester Stallone. maybe, or someone else, like Hulk Hogan, may he rest in peace, the Chameleon, and Calypso. I could also see Terrence Stamp as Craven. I don't know who would have been a good choice. Green Goblin would also return as the secondary antagonist. He would break out and would leave Kingpin behind. Yeah, Kingpin doesn't really do a lot in this movie. Throughout most of the movie, Peter would be getting ready to have his first day with Gwen. And of course, we would also get introduced to Captain George Stacy, who I could see being played by Clint Eastwood. Or maybe even Sean Connery. I think either of them could have been good. But as for who I would cast as Gwen Stacy, I'd say the actress who played Willie from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Yeah, I'm casting some Indiana Jones actors because I'm a big Indiana Jones fan. I appreciate the first 4 movies. Those are the only ones that matter to me. What Steven Spielberg did for this franchise is what matters to me the most. I do not like Dial of Destiny. I think it's the worst one of the franchise. It's just terrible. But let's move on. Apparently, midway through the film, Gwen gets kidnapped and Spider-Man fights Kraven, Chameleon, and Calypso. I would have it be established that Chameleon is the one who kidnapped Gwen. In the end, Spider-Man would stop them, but to parallel the ending of Superman 2, Gwen and Peter's relationship is in a standstill. Rather than Gwen dying or them breaking up, Gwen is knocked out. She's in a coma and she's going to be in a hospital for the next few weeks, thus giving the movie a dark ending. This all could have been played by the Green Goblin, but this would be a cliffhanger setting up Spider-Man 3, released in 1983. In this movie, Peter's just down in his luck since the events of the previous movie. MJ would return, and I could actually see Annette O'Toole as MJ. She would have been perfect. They start to reconnect after not seeing each other in high school. Gwen would wake up, but she has suffered memory loss, so she has to spend time with her family. As for new characters, Black Cat would appear, and I think Margaret Kidder would have been good. And she would be like a side love interest for Spider-Man, because throughout most of the movie, Spider-Man would have the black suit, which he would have gotten in the first half. At first it's normal, but then he starts to go out of his way beating criminals up badly. He wouldn't kill them, but still. As for the villains, they would be Silvermane and Mysterio. Green Goblin wouldn't appear. For Mysterio, he would be played by maybe Bruce Campbell, since he was supposed to play Mr. Spider-Man 4, or probably Gene Wilder. Whereas Silvermane, he would be played by, I would say, Lance Henriksen would have been good. As for, Gus Gorman, this would be Robbie Robertson, who would be played by Richard Pryor. Perfect casting. And he would be like, catching on Peter Spider-Man's actions as reported by J. Jonah Jameson, who also would have been in Spider-Man 2. And then, midway through the movie, Spider-Man finds out Mysterio has not only captured MJ, but he also has captured Gwen. And so it's a race to the finish. But after what happened, he gives up the black suit, like after what he was doing to the criminals. And Black Cat would also help him. In the end, they managed to save both MJ and Gwen and stop Mysterio and Silvermane. And in the end, Peter and Gwen would share a kiss. After the whole movie would be about them reconnecting their relationship. And Black Cat would also leave. This would be setting up a spin-off movie called Black Cat, released in 1984. The first half of the movie would basically tell Black Cat's origins and what happened to her father and his death. As for who I could see playing Walter Hardy, I would say John Rhys Davis, perhaps. Or, I don't know, really. I guess anyone could have been good. Like Miguel Fuhrer. But as for the villains, they would be Kingpin, who, with Ned Beatty returning, and Silver Sable, who I could see being played by Elizabeth Shue, who wants revenge on Black Cat for what she did to her father. Spider-Man's out of the question. And basically, the second half would be Black Cat versus Kingpin. And in the end, she would manage to stop both Silver Sable and Kingpin. And decides to be Black Cat on occasion. The ending would set up Spider-Man 4 with Harry getting the symbiote. And then we move on to Spider-Man 4, Web of Fate. This would be the conclusion to the original Spider-Man franchise. In the beginning, Peter and Gwen would be getting married, but throughout most of the movie, Gwen is pregnant with Peter's child, and Peter's concerned about how he'll be as a father because he may not have the power to multitask being Spider-Man, being for his father, and working at the Daily Bugle. It is tricky. And essentially, he would hear news of this new anti-Spider-Man who people are calling Venom. And basically, he would free Green Goblin, who would have been arrested at the end of Spider-Man 2. And Green Goblin and Venom, Harry's Venom, would be the villains. It all comes full circle in the end, with the Osborns as the villains. Harry's mother would have also been mentioned to be dead, since she would have been a character in Spider-Man 1 and 2, but by Spider-Man 3, she would have been said to have died because of cancer. And of course, there would also be another villain that would be Shocker. And apparently, Spider-Man would face Shocker before fighting Green Goblin and Venom. But he would fight Venom first. I say Venom for Nuclear Man because apparently back when Nuclear Man was being developed, the plan was to have Bizarro, but then they switched it to Nuclear Man, or at least Bizarro in some capacity. Now, Gwen, by this time, would have become the new police chief, captain of the NYPD, since her father would have been retired. However, midway through, she goes into labor. And essentially, Spider-Man and Harry's Venom would fight at first, but then Harry's managing to take control of the symbiote, and then the final battle would be Spider-Man and Harry's Venom versus Green Goblin. Essentially, Harry would realize that he can choose his own decisions, become his own person, separate from the Green Goblin. And this would lead to the final battle. And in the end, Green Goblin would be defeated. Essentially, he would be killed off with, his glider piercing him. And Harry would put the symbiote in a container where it can no longer take control of him. Peter would rush to the hospital after hearing the news of Gwen being in labor. And essentially, he helps Gwen with the birth of their child, and she is successful. And they would name him Ben Stacy Parker II. Yes, Ben would be his first name, named after Uncle Ben, Stacy being his middle name, taking his mother and grandfather's last name, and Parker, taking the last name of his father, granduncle, grandaunt, and grandparents on his father's side. The movie would end with Peter and Gwen at their home, and Harry would and MJ would appear too. And Flash, who would have been a character in the first movie. Like, they'd all be proud for Peter being a father, but afterward they would leave. Peter would decide to give up being Spider-Man, because then he wouldn't have to multitask, with being a superhero, being a father, and being there for the Daily Bugle. Gwen says it may have been hard, but he made the right decision. And then the final words would be, with great power comes great responsibility. But sometimes the greatest responsibility would be to know when to stop and face your greatest challenge yet. Those words would have been said by Ed Asner's Uncle Ben. It all would have come full circle in the end. Now, there would have been plans for like a Spider-Man 5 with Dr. Octopus as the villain, but those plans would be scrapped. Unlike Superman 5, which was because Superman 4 was a failure, it would have been because of disagreements with the cast, the director, and the studio. Likely would have been 20th Century Fox at this point in time. Fox would have wanted to make a fifth movie, but the cast and the director, whether that would have been Richard Donner or someone else, would have disagreed, saying Spider-Man 4 ended the story perfectly. We do not need any more. And also the actor who plays Spider-Man would feel like that he's done playing Spider-Man. He doesn't want to do it anymore. He feels like he's getting old and wants to stop pretending that he was younger than he was back in 1978. This, of course, would then make Fox in the end would make the decision to cancel Spider-Man 5 due to disagreements. And then Fox would have attempted at a reboot with James Cameron as the director, but then Sony would have gotten their hands on Spider-Man, and obviously then we would have gotten the Raimi films, the Webb films, and the Tom Holland films. We still would have gotten those. And all the shows that came out after 1987, like the animated series, Unlimited, Spectacular, Tenace, Ultimate Spider-Man, Spidey's Amazing Friends, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and Spider-Man 2017, they would all still happen. So that's essentially what if Spider-Man was the first superhero movie instead of Superman 1978. One thing I will admit is that perhaps Marvel could have dominated earlier. That would have been true. I might do a follow-up where I discuss Superman or how this affects Batman. But when it comes to Batman 89 and Batman Returns would have been less dark and would have been more akin to the Spider-Man films. Because, like I said, I think Batman and Spider-Man have some things in common, and not a lot of people just see it. But I don't know what would have happened, honestly. But if you have any ideas, let me know in the comments down below. Anyways, I will see you all later, true believers. And with great power comes great responsibility.